The Journey of Confidence, a story of language learning. Once upon a time, I had a student named Sarah. She was a beginner in learning English, and from the very first lesson, I noticed that she was shy and lacked confidence. Sarah had recently moved to the country because of her husband's job. She was excited about the new chapter in her life, but she was also terrified of the language barrier. Her fear of making mistakes held her back, and it was hard for her to speak in front of others. Every time we had a lesson, Sarah would sit quietly, nodding and trying to follow, but she rarely spoke. I could see that she was afraid of speaking in English, worried that people might judge her if she made a mistake. I could relate to how she felt. We all experience that fear when learning something new. But I also knew that the key to learning any language is practice, and the only way to build confidence is to step out of your comfort zone. So I started encouraging Sarah to speak, even if it was just a few words at a time. I made sure that every mistake she made was seen as a step toward improvement, not something to be ashamed of. Gradually, Sarah began to speak more. We practiced real-life situations, ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, and even talking about her daily life. I always reminded her that English was a tool for communication, not a test to be perfect at. One day, Sarah told me she was feeling more confident and was excited to start talking to people in her new city. She had even made a few friends, and they had invited her to a coffee shop. But she still felt nervous. She wanted to make a good impression and be able to understand everything. That day, I gave her a simple piece of advice. It's okay not to understand everything. Just keep trying, and remember, people don't expect you to speak perfectly. They'll appreciate your effort. A few weeks later, Sarah came to our lesson with a big smile. She told me that her coffee shop experience had been amazing. She had understood most of the conversation, and when she didn't, she had used her new English skills to ask for clarification. For the first time, she wasn't afraid to make mistakes. Her confidence was growing, and I was so proud of her. But there was still one challenge ahead. She had to give a presentation in English at her husband's workplace. It was her biggest test yet. Sarah asked for my help, and I promised to guide her through it. And so our story continues. Will Sarah overcome her fear of speaking in front of a group? Can she deliver a confident presentation? Stay tuned to find out. After Sarah's success at the coffee shop, I could see that her confidence was growing. But soon a new challenge arose. Sarah came to me with a worried expression on her face. I have to give a presentation at my husband's workplace, she said. It's in English, and I'm so nervous. I can barely speak in front of a few people. What if I make a mistake? What if they don't understand me? I knew this moment would come. Giving a presentation in a new language is one of the hardest things for many learners. Pressure of speaking in front of a group of people, especially when it's in a second language, can be overwhelming. But I also knew that with the right preparation and mindset, Sarah could do it. First, we worked together on calming her nerves. I explained that feeling nervous was perfectly normal, and that even native speakers get nervous before speaking in front of an audience. It was all about how to manage those feelings. One of the techniques I taught her was deep breathing exercises. Before you speak, I said, take a few deep breaths, clear your mind, and remind yourself that mistakes are part of the process. People don't expect perfection, they want to hear your ideas. Next, we focused on content. I asked Sarah to think about the main message she wanted to convey in her presentation. What's the most important thing you want people to remember? I asked. What's your goal in giving this presentation? This step helped Sarah organize her thoughts and make her speech more focused. To build her speaking skills further, we used the chunking method. Instead of trying to memorize the entire presentation word for word, I encouraged Sarah to break it down into smaller, manageable parts or chunks. Each chunk would cover a specific point or idea. For example, one chunk might explain the introduction, the next one could be about the main point, and another one would focus on the conclusion. By breaking it into pieces, Sarah could focus on one part at a time without feeling overwhelmed. I also introduced the visual cue technique. Sarah created a set of simple slides for her presentation, each one representing a key point. The slides didn't contain full sentences. Instead, they included images and key phrases. I explained that visual aids could help reduce the cognitive load, as Sarah wouldn't need to remember every word. Instead, she could rely on the slides to guide her through the presentation. Sarah practiced several times in front of a mirror, watching her body language and improving her pronunciation. How you say it is just as important as what you say, I reminded her. We worked on her tone, rhythm, and posture. She learned to make eye contact with herself in the mirror, and over time it helped her feel more confident. As the day of the presentation approached, Sarah became more and more focused. The night before, she sent me a message. I feel ready. I've practiced so much, but I'm still nervous. What if I forget something? I reassured her. It's okay to forget things. Just breathe and keep going. You know the material, and your audience will appreciate your effort, even if you make a mistake. The day of the presentation arrived, and Sarah looked a little nervous but also determined. She arrived at the workplace early to get comfortable with the setting. I reminded her, "You've got this. Just focus on your message and the people in the room." As Sarah began her presentation, I could see that she was nervous at first, but she quickly settled into the rhythm of her speech. She used her slides as cues, and each chunk of information flowed smoothly. There were a few moments when she hesitated, but instead of panicking, she took a deep breath, smiled, and continued. After the presentation, Sarah told me how it went. It wasn't perfect, but I didn't expect it to be. I spoke clearly, and people were engaged. They asked questions, and I answered without feeling scared. I made a few mistakes, but I kept going. I felt good about it. I was incredibly proud of her. Sarah had faced one of the most challenging situations for any language learner, speaking in public. But through practice, the right techniques, and a positive mindset, she had overcome her fear. The methods that helped Sarah: 1. Deep breathing and mindfulness. One of the biggest challenges for language learners is anxiety. Sarah's fear of speaking was holding her back, so we worked on calming techniques like deep breathing. This not only helped her reduce stress, but it also helped her focus on the task at hand. By staying calm, she was able to organize her thoughts and speak more clearly. 2. Chunking method. Rather than trying to memorize her entire presentation, Sarah learned to break it down into smaller parts. This made the process less overwhelming and allowed her to concentrate on one point at a time. Chunking method is a great way for language learners to handle longer speeches or conversations in bite-sized pieces, making it easier to remember and deliver. 3 visual aids and cues. Creating simple slides with key phrases and images helped Sarah stay on track. The visual cues served as a reminder of the main points of her presentation, reducing her cognitive load. This method works well for learners who feel overwhelmed by trying to remember too much information at once. 4. Pronunciation and body language practice. Through mirror exercises, Sarah became more aware of her body language, which boosted her confidence. Practicing pronunciation and body language together made her speech sound more natural and engaging. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. 5. Positive reinforcement. I always made sure to encourage Sarah, even when she made mistakes. We celebrated every little improvement, whether it was a new word learned or a more confident sentence spoken. This kept her motivated and reminded her that progress takes time. Now that Sarah had overcome her fear of public speaking, I knew that her journey was far from over. Learning a new language is a lifelong process, and each challenge presents an opportunity for growth. Sarah's next step was to start using English in her everyday life more frequently. She began to explore new hobbies like joining an English book club and attending language exchange events. There were still many obstacles ahead, but with each challenge, Sarah was becoming more confident in her abilities. Sarah had come a long way since her first days of learning English. The shy, hesitant woman who once struggled to speak even a few words was now more confident and ready to face the world. With each passing day, she grew stronger in her abilities and began to embrace the opportunities around her. One morning, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee as she scrolled through job listings on her laptop. She had been searching for a while, but finding the right job was still a challenge. I want to use my English more, she thought, and I want to feel like I'm really making a difference in the world. Her husband had been supportive, encouraging her to explore new job opportunities. But Sarah knew that she needed something that would allow her to practice English every day. Something that would help her grow both personally and professionally. Then she came across an advertisement for a caregiver position at a local nursing home. The job involved helping elderly residents with their daily needs, providing companionship, and ensuring their well-being. The description mentioned that fluency in English was preferred, but it wasn't a strict requirement. Without hesitation, Sarah decided to apply. She had always enjoyed spending time with elderly people and had a natural empathy for them. She knew this job would be challenging, but she was determined to give it a try. The next day, Sarah prepared for her interview. She had done her research on the nursing home, practiced answering common interview questions in English, and even wrote down some questions she wanted to ask. "I've got this," she thought as she checked her appearance in the mirror. "I've come so far and I'm ready for this." The interview. When Sarah arrived at the nursing home for her interview, she was nervous but excited. The building was warm and inviting, with a beautiful garden out front. As she walked in, she was greeted by the receptionist, who led her to the interview room. The interviewer, a kind woman named Mrs. Thomas, welcomed Sarah with a smile. "Thank you for coming, Sarah. We're excited to learn more about you." Sarah took a deep breath and smiled back. She was ready. As the interview began, Mrs. Thomas asked about Sarah's background and why she was interested in the position. "I've always enjoyed helping others, and I feel that working with elderly people would be a rewarding experience," Sarah explained, her voice steady. "I recently moved here, and I'm looking for a job where I can use my English skills and connect with people." Mrs. Thomas nodded. "That's great to hear. What do you think is the most important quality for someone in this job?" Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "Empathy and patience are key. It's important to listen and make the residents feel comfortable, especially since many of them may be feeling lonely or confused." The interview continued, and Sarah felt more and more confident as she spoke. She had prepared for this moment, and it was paying off. By the end of the interview, Mrs. Thomas smiled warmly. "You've made a great impression, Sarah. We'd like to offer you the position. A new challenge." Sarah was overjoyed. She had landed her first job in her new country, and it was a job that would challenge her English skills and allow her to help others. She couldn't wait to get started. Her first day at the nursing home was both exciting and overwhelming. The staff was friendly and welcoming, but the job itself was demanding. Sarah had to help the residents with everything from getting dressed and eating to participating in activities and keeping track of their medical needs. Many of the residents had hearing impairments or dementia, which meant that clear communication was crucial. First, Sarah struggled with understanding some of the medical terminology and certain accents, but she didn't let that stop her. Every day, she made a conscious effort to improve her English by listening carefully, asking questions when needed, and practicing her communication skills. She would write down new words she encountered and review them in her free time. One of her biggest challenges was communicating with Mr. Roberts, an elderly resident with a thick accent. First, Sarah could hardly understand him. He would speak in short, rapid sentences, often mixing in slang and colloquialisms that were unfamiliar to her. But instead of getting frustrated, Sarah decided to take a proactive approach. She started by asking Mr. Roberts to repeat what he said more slowly, and she would ask for clarification if she didn't understand a word. Over time, they began to develop a rapport, and Sarah was able to follow his speech more easily. "How are you doing today, Mr. Roberts?" she would ask, and he would answer with a smile and a few jokes, which always brightened her day. Building relationships and confidence. As the weeks went by, Sarah became more comfortable in her role. She developed close relationships with the residents, learning about their lives and forming meaningful connections. Her English skills continued to improve, and she started to feel more at ease speaking with both the staff and the residents. One of the most rewarding parts of her job was helping Mrs. Jenkins, a sweet elderly woman who had difficulty remembering things. Mrs. Jenkins often became upset when she couldn't recall something, so Sarah would sit with her and gently reassure her. They would talk about Mrs. Jenkins' childhood, and Sarah would listen attentively, even when the stories repeated themselves. It was through these conversations that Sarah's empathy and communication skills grew the most. By now, Sarah was no longer the shy woman who hesitated to speak in English. She had transformed into someone who could confidently express herself, offer support, and make a real difference in the lives of others. And with each conversation, whether it was with a resident, a coworker, or a family member, Sarah's confidence continued to grow. A bright future ahead. One day, Mrs. Thomas called Sarah into her office. "You've been doing such an excellent job, Sarah. We'd like to offer you a full-time position with more responsibilities. You've really shown that you have the skills and the heart for this job." Sarah's heart swelled with pride. She had come so far, from the timid beginner to the confident caregiver who was now trusted to take on more responsibilities. "I would love that," Sarah replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much for the opportunity." As Sarah continued to thrive in her role, she realized that her journey wasn't just about learning English. It was about finding a purpose, building connections, and using her newfound confidence to make a positive impact on the world around her. There were still challenges ahead, but Sarah knew that with each step she took, she was growing stronger and more capable than ever before. Comprehension and discussion questions. 1. Why did Sarah decide to apply for a job at the nursing home? What were her reasons for choosing this specific job, and how did her motivation change over time? 2. How did Sarah prepare for her job interview? What steps did she take to prepare for the interview, and why was this preparation important? 3. What challenges did Sarah face while working at the nursing home? Can you identify specific challenges she encountered in her role, especially in terms of language and communication? 4. How did Sarah overcome the communication difficulties with Mr. Roberts? What strategies did Sarah use to understand Mr. Roberts better, and how did their relationship evolve? 5. What qualities do you think are important for someone working in a caregiving role, based on Sarah's experience? Reflect on the key qualities that made Sarah successful in her new job. How can these qualities help in other areas of life? 6. How did Sarah's English skills improve over time in the nursing home? What specific actions did Sarah take to improve her English, and how did these actions contribute to her progress? 7. What role did empathy play in Sarah's job, and how did it help her connect with the residents? Explain how empathy helped Sarah build stronger relationships with the elderly residents. How is empathy important in language learning? 8. What do you think Sarah learned about herself through her job? In what ways did Sarah's job help her grow, both personally and professionally? 9. How would you feel if you were in Sarah's position, working in a new job in a foreign country? Imagine yourself in Sarah's shoes. What would you find most challenging, and how would you overcome it? 10. What do you think will happen next in Sarah's story? How do you think Sarah will continue to develop her English skills and her career? What challenges and opportunities might arise for her in the future? Vocabulary and grammar practice. 1. Vocabulary check. Write down 5 new words or phrases from the story that you didn't know before. Use them in your own sentences. 2. Grammar practice. Find 3 examples of present perfect tense in the story. Why is the present perfect used in these sentences? Rewrite the sentences using the past simple instead. 3. Story retelling. Try to retell the story in your own words. Focus on using the past tense to describe what happened to Sarah from the beginning to the end of the story. Critical thinking questions. 1. Do you think Sarah made the right choice in choosing a caregiving job? Why or why not? What other types of jobs could Sarah have considered? How does this choice reflect her values and goals? 2. How important is it to continue practicing language skills in real-life situations? Based on Sarah's experience, how did practicing English at her job help her improve? What other real-life situations could help someone improve their language skills? 3. What advice would you give to someone who is starting a new job in a foreign country? What are some key tips or strategies to help someone feel more confident and successful in a new job, especially when language is a barrier?